NUTRIMEDICAL Report with Dr. Bill Deagle and Tim Alexander, the Earl Sterling. Dr. Bill will be right back. We have a lot to cover today. The last half hour, our nuclear specialist will be joining us. Right now, we're going to be talking about some of the stuff that's happening in the Middle East. Yesterday, we took two major steps towards a third world war. The Syrian war cabinet was basically just about wiped out by a terrorist blast. And today, about 3 hours ago, the Russians and Chinese vetoed a UN resolution, which basically would have given authorization to use military force against Syria. Bill, you back?
Yeah, I am back indeed. Yeah, I just read that report earlier too. What's really interesting is they keep on applying the same tactic as expecting a different answer. It's like, doesn't the West get it? Russia and China aren't capitulating. Each time they do, they embarrass not only Syria and Iran, but they guarantee that they're going to have to assemble a more vigorous response, like with this bomber that blew up the brother-in-law of Assad and several other generals. This means security is going to increase. It means the Syrians are going to ask the Russians for the S-300 or S-400 systems. It means the missile batteries are going to be in place. They're going to probably ask for troop support from China and Russia. It's going to increase more hardware. It means that our Navy is in more danger, because if they do naval operations and it looks like they're doing something that could be provocative against Syria, Syria is going to fire maybe first. And that means we could have
this is a complex thing that's evolving. Syria is the back door to Iran, but they want to take out Syria. They want to take out Iran. They want to take out Hezbollah in Lebanon. A few years ago, Israel created a pretext and invaded southern Lebanon. I knew they were going to get their butts kicked, because they knew Syria had bought a large number of the very powerful but relatively inexpensive AT-14 Comet anti-tank missiles. They absolutely chewed up the Israeli main battle tanks, and after a few weeks, Israel tucked its tail, withdrew, and declared victory.
Isn't that typical of Israel, declaring victory while they retreat?
Yeah. Well, the Israelis are extremely arrogant, and that's a shame, because the route they're going down now is a route of national suicide. The global banksters, the global banking cartel families they want a world war, they want total global chaos. They're quite prepared to sacrifice Israel. Many of the banksters are Jewish, but many aren't. But they don't care. Israel is just a chip in the game, and they could care less. And that's basically the position that many of the intelligence people in Israel that are now retired or have been screaming for some time. This route is a route of national suicide. But Satan tends to blind his minions, and Netanyahu and the characters around him. All they know is blood, death, destruction, and the usual Mossad false flag operations. Now, yesterday we had the destruction of most of the Syrian war cabinet, which struck very close to home, literally killed Assad's brother-in-law. But also you had this bombing in Bulgaria of a tour bus. Now, Bulgaria is very close. The Bulgarian intelligence service is very close to the Mossad, and the Mossad trains their intelligence services. Of all the Eastern European countries, Bulgaria has the most oppressive surveillance system. I mean, literally, if you go into Bulgaria, you have to provide receipts. Where did you spend your money? Did you go out to eat? Where you need a receipt? They watch everything, and essentially, I believe that the attack was a Mossad false flag. I think they killed their own people for several reasons. If you look at the timing, three things actually happened yesterday. They dug up some old guy about close to 100 years old, and they said he was a war criminal from World War II. Well, I'm 61. I was born 4.5 years after World War II ended. My late father would be 93, and he was a young man in his 20s in World War II. So, you're talking, Israel always plays the victim card. The trouble is they're running out of these people they can claim were killed all kind of Jews in World War II because the people were in their late 90s or 100s. So they arrested this guy. They also did a bombing and killed a bunch of innocent Israeli civilians on a bus. The guy, the mastermind behind it, okay, guess what? He was a prisoner at Guantanamo Bay for several years. The man was tortured. The man was fed drugs. He is a classic Manchurian candidate. So anyway, at the same time that they're blowing up Assad's war cabinet, they blow up their own bus with some of their own people, and they arrange for arrest of some old guy that they claim is some great war criminal from 60-some years ago.
Pretty stupid, isn't it?
Two events, all were victims,
and they claim within hours too. They claim this within hours. That's what I find bizarre, is these people come out, Iran did it through some kind of advanced network. How would they know within hours?
Oh, absolutely. Netanyahu, the bodies were not even cold from the bombing, and Netanyahu is claiming that Iran did it, and Hezbollah. Others were claiming Hezbollah and Syria did it. If you look at the Israeli news media and all the senior politicians, there were three groups guilty: Syria, Iran, and Hezbollah. And some politicians picked two of those three. Others, the media picked the different two. But it all came. And how do they know? If their intelligence was so good, why didn't they stop it?
Right.
The reality is, it's part of the ongoing.
It's more like a 9/11. It's like a review I did on the report this morning on 7/7 bombing in Britain, that they had hired 4 flunky Muslims to act as the flunkies while they're doing a war game simulation in Britain, and then they blew up their own trains with bombs underneath the trains where these so-called Muslim bombers couldn't even get. They proved that the cars were blown up below the actual floor of the train. It wasn't blown up by bombs inside in backpacks. So what we have is fools. Now, I sometimes deal with what I call vicious ignorance. And it's whether it's people that you meet on the street, or people that are relatives, or people that email or call. Your level of stupidity out there, if you don't want to face the music that your government is the terror of the 20th century, the number of people, millions of people killed, well, not by terrorists, by lone gunmen or whatever. It's governments. It's the government of Soviet Union, Russia. It's the government of China. It's the government of the United States that did the false flag in 9/11. It's the government of the United States that did Oklahoma City. And these governments actually collaborate to even create these super plagues they want to foist in the earth, like the H1N1 flu, H5N1 flu. If you're viciously ignorant to the point where you don't believe that, for example, they... And I heard an interesting report the other night from, and I've got to get him on the program too, but he basically said, we have, in a sense, the Mossad and the Mossad-operated senators and the lobbying agencies inside America that literally steer American policy. I mean, it's just ridiculous. In the same way we even try to capitulate to the Pakistanis. We have an American. We have basically.
Israel's Dr. Bill. Israel's the size of maybe Rhode Island, and they're a foreign country that we have donated about 5 times the entire amount we spent on the U.S. space program.
Right. Now, here's the point. When we have this kind of situation, we have Americans starving. We have 44% of the population now on food stamps or some form of financial support. And yet, we're putting our hand out. And by the way, Israel suppresses Christian evangelism inside Israel. And they are one of the most racist nations on earth. And yet, we support them. we're crazy. And again, the same way, why do we give millions to the Pakistanis? So they won't release this doctor. We'll get back and talk about that in a moment. Back and just got an email, believe it or not, from John Moore, sent out to me just recently here. He said in the top of the email says, "No need for panic" is the title of my paper I wrote for fall 2005, published in January 2006. The note is as follows. I'll follow up to my paper. Tuesday, July 10th, one of my private trusted sources told me the following. He heard a woman telling her employer that she attended a classified briefing of spouses of DOD personnel that are part of the COG, Continuity of Government Contingency Planning. This may contain 1 or 2% of all DOD personnel. Prior to the briefing meeting, she had to sign a non-disclosure agreement. During the briefing, she was told about the Nibiru, Planet X wormwood. I call it the Passover star. This is a star that they used to call the Satan star, Herculebus, the destroyer. It's the winged star of ancient, the cartouches in the ancient temples in Egypt and Samaria. This is very well known. The soon-to-happen flooding of the Atlantic coast has shown a map. It was very closely resembling the map of my DVD showing the flooding of North America coastal areas. She was told to prepare for an evacuation order that could come soon. They were told that they may have as much as 2 weeks warning. They may not. Now, I've done a lot of research on this, and I can tell you that not only when my scientific research and spirit kind of lines up, then you have to take notice. And what I have is that the star that I call the Passover star that is approaching our inner solar system from the southern ecliptic is the exact same red dwarf star, class 3 red dwarf star that actually approached what we call the Passover star at the time of Moses. It's the star that caused the gravitonic and volcanic events that caused Thera to explode to destroy the Minoan civilization in the eastern Mediterranean. And a plume of radiation.
Wasn't that the Atlantis?
Yeah, exactly. This is the Atlantis mythology that was there. And there are also colonies from this area that were destroyed out in the Atlantic Ocean, too, beyond the gates of Gibraltar, which is out in the ocean, because there were areas in the Sargasso Sea that they're now finding evidence there were giant areas of land that literally become submerged. Now, what I mean by all of this is that I'm not putting dates on it, but I can tell you that we have a Brazilian astronomer who's already come forward on this. I have contacts about the South Pole Telescope, and I can tell you that we've been monitoring this object since the early 70s, actually doing the Explorer, one of the early Explorer satellites that was sent out there called Voyager, was sent out literally to find out if this object was present in the Oort cloud, which is beyond the edge of the solar system. Because they found evidence going right back to Tycho Brahe and other astronomers over 100 and some years ago about the perturbations of Neptune, etc., indicating from their calculations, from Newtonian calculations, that there had to be something affecting the gravitonics. Well, that meant there was a very large object creating gravity waves that affected the movement of other objects in deep space, probably up to 50 times the diameter of the solar system. Now, he goes on here. Monday, I had another private source in Homeland Security verify the information of the above-mentioned briefing. Today, I spoke with another source, Mr. Mike Harris. Mike is a fellow talk show host in RBN, and the time slot following mine, Mike has a private trusted source who is a high-ranking member of the Foreign Intelligence Agency. This source tells Mike that Nibiru will make its closest passage to Earth coming into our solar system on August 17, 2012, and its closest passage outward bound on September 26, 2012. Mike has verified this intelligence with another private source, a former high-ranking member of the Reagan administration. And intelligence received so far points to the Atlantic Ocean event, probably connected to the Canary Island risk of a landslide generating a tidal wave. Now, I've been in contact with, and I will be getting more technical contact with the San Jose Tsunami Research Center and the one in Zurich, Switzerland. And what I have seen there from the evidence I've gathered so far, is that the tsunami that would be generated from the sliding off of, and this is from the BBC special and others, you can go on YouTube and find it yourself.
Yeah, I've seen that. I mean, that is a real serious danger.
Right, and what happened is it's already started sliding in the mid-'80s, and they've been monitoring it. They have GPS monitoring it down to centimeters of movement of this chunk of this island. And it's already forming what's called steam jets. There's an area near this area called El Hierro that's literally building a new island from the volcano, literally rising up through the ocean. If the steam literally makes this block of this island slide, just this landing in the ocean will create a wave that will strike North America with a wall of water between 600 and 800 feet high, traveling at 600 miles an hour, just under the speed of sound. That means the speed of a jumbo jet coming toward America with a wall of water. Now, remember now, the tsunami that struck Sendai, Japan, I think was, 100 feet high? 80 to 100?
Over 100, I think.
I think 120, okay. So let's say we'll talk about this one. This will be roughly 6 to 8 times higher, carrying somewhere around, when we talk about exponentially, talking about around 1,000 times more energy. And because of the geography of the east coast of the United States, which is, you can go up to between 100 and 300 miles in, and you're no higher than 300 feet above sea level, large areas of the eastern seaboard will be swamp. And that means we have just between Washington, D.C. and Baltimore and Boston, the United area in Boston, you have somewhere around 85 to 90 million people living within 100 miles of the coast.
And lots of Fukushima-type nuclear reactors, by the way.
Tons of them. I mean, it's just chock-a-block full of nuclear reactors, and none of them have station backups. None of them have evacuation procedures that'll work. And if the island slides off at 2 a.m., Eastern Standard Time America, those people will be asleep and have only a 2-hour window to get out of town, to get out of Dodge. Those freeways will be jammed. Anybody with a helicopter on the helipad on their roof that's a billionaire will be out of town and gone to his rescue place.
Well, you have to get high.
You got to get high. Now, the problem is they're even telling people that they may be going in buildings. So I want to read on, and this is one of the things I learned is the U.S. Military Intelligence School, as well as being criminal investigators since '73, this is John speaking, was to look for reliable sources who didn't know each other giving the same information. Here we have 4 reliable sources all saying the same thing. Blink, blink. I mean, one of the reasons why I have John on is John is a straight shooter. He's a believer, he's a straight shooter, and he's a good investigator, which is why he's a forensic investigator. That's his job right now, by the way, forensic investigator for murder and major crimes. He's like Quincy, the Quincy, the pathologist who investigates. He's a Quincy, okay? And he's real smart. I trust his intelligence is enough to take personal action based on it. We human beings go through every 3,600 years. We're going through this every 3,600. The range of effects will run from mild irritation to killing most inhabitants on Earth. Now,
well, I'll tell you this much. He was right on the money with finding Dr. Zakari and exposing what the British petroleum oil disaster has done. We're living I'm in the Midwest right now. It's 100 degrees outside, but it feels closer to 110 with we have a little bit of humidity. The drought in the Midwest is a disaster that's going to be a biblical proportion because the weather all over the world. India is now going through drought. The United Kingdom is flooded and cold. Alaska is cold.
Now, Tim, everybody is twitchy. Even the Iranians are trying to accuse the Americans of using HARP. HARP is a system where if you're a ham radio operator, it's 100,000 times more power than any regular radio station. It's not HARP. This is the destruction of the loop current. And by the way, I talked to Dr. William Ray. I have other sources on this. They are using thousands of gallons of Corexit 9500, which is neurotoxic from ExxonMobil, when oil spill leader 2 could be used every day in the Macondo because it's still leaking. 2 years later, and they're settling all the lawsuits, capping all the legal actions off. The Gulf is still toxic, and they're still releasing it.
You mean our government is lying to us?
Yeah.
Gee, golly, that's hard to believe.
Yeah, exactly. Back in a moment.
What a beautiful world this will be. What a glorious time to be free. What a beautiful world this will be.
We are joined by the illustrious, this is his radio name, by the way, not his real name, Chris Harris, the nuclear safety specialist. And by the way, to use a little humor here, one of the things that I've been accused of recently is the Forrest Gump syndrome, just like Forrest Gump being written with advanced video arts, to shaking hands with John F. Kennedy and doing all these amazing things. Guess what? whether it's Deagle or Chris Harris or Tim Alexander or Alex Jones or anybody who's out there just doing their job, there's 2 commandments God gave. Love your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And if there's only one character defect which I have, besides speaking too fast and interrupting people, is I don't have reverse gear, and I don't have the fear gene. I'm not afraid. I'm going to do what I have to do. I'm not stupid, though. To be fearless doesn't mean careless. To be fearless means you're fully aware of how dangerous it is out there, and you're fully prepared for it, including whether it's coronal mass ejections, backup power supplies, water, armaments, food supply, also being ready to help your neighbor. You can't give what you don't have. And the same thing goes in the East Coast. If, for example, if we have backup power supplies or extreme weather, which is going to come this year, that are going to knock out the power supplies, we don't have a proper nuclear response in terms of safety procedures for our nuclear reactors itself, whether it's a big earthquake striking the New Madrid fault system, where literally 25 reactors are sitting within strike zone there just to the New Madrid system. The East Coast is chock-a-block full of most of the reactors in America are on the East Coast, sitting there just waiting like sitting ducks for a tsunami to hit them. And to talk about this in Fukushima and give us the latest updates, including San Onofre, which is just a disgusting mess, that finally they came out with a report at the last minute. Tell us what's going on, Chris, in terms of this latest report and what's happening.
Okay, Dr. Bill, Tim, I think there's a little bit of Forrest Gump in all of us, I suppose.
Well, Forrest Gump, you know what it is? God calls us and he says, I'm going to call Chris Harris, I'm going to call Deagle. He says, and God says, many are called, but few are chosen. Now, who does the choosing? Chris, you answered. Who does the choosing? Many are called, but few are chosen.
Yep.
God does the calling, we do the choosing.
Well, that's true.
We're the choosers, okay? We're not the callers. God is a caller. God can call 1,000,000, but only 10 may respond, just like Gideon's armory.
Well, we are doing. I kind of think it's like the Archangel Gabriel's helpers. We're getting the word out to people about what's really happening, and
we're
what
the witnesses.
People do with that word is up to them.
Well, yeah, exactly. We don't save anybody. We don't change anybody's mind. In fact, I tell people, some people say, you just think you're like a cult. You want to change everything. I say, no, I don't. I don't want to change anybody's mind. Nobody. I can't change your mind. All I can do is I can maybe change your perspective. I can maybe get you eventually to ask a better question. And then maybe if you research it, you'll say, oh my gosh, maybe Deagle's not a nut. Maybe he is as smart as he thinks he is. Maybe the people he has on are experts in their area. Maybe the cohesive mass of evil crap that he's talking about really is real. And if we respond to it, we can stay healthy with our NutriMeds. We can protect ourselves from radiation from Fukushima. We can respond with the toxic GMO foods. We can take action to get rid of toxic crap in our food like aspartame. We can deal with toxic environmental and financial policies. We can really get Jesus back into the churches and Satan out. We can get rid of Islam and neutralize our foreign policies of stupidity. Guess what? It's going to take some repentance. And those are the steps to talk about repentance. Repentance isn't just, oh, I'm sorry, God. You know what God says? God says, and this is a word from me saying from God, repentance is to change your direction, turn around and walk in the other direction, which means that requires intellectual effort, it requires spiritual effort, and it requires putting your neck in your finances and your family and your reputation and your personal relationships with your family, your friends, and your colleagues on the line. And if you don't do that, you're not, as Jesus said, you're not a follower of the Most High God. That's why he said, father and mother is not your biological father and mother. It's your friends and relatives who believe in the Most High God. Your biological and genetic relatives are not your brothers and sisters. In terms of God's kingdom, your brothers and sisters can be in a foreign country. They can be believers in China. They are people who have finally grasped the need that if you don't serve God, you cannot do anything other than serve the dark side. Like the Star Wars. If you're not serving the Most High God, you will
there's
by
not
default.
Really an in-between.
There's no in-between. If you say, I don't want to cause any trouble, I don't want to disrupt my job, I don't want to upset my relatives, I don't want to say anything that may seem like I'm a nut by thinking that the government would do 9/11, or that there may be an object approaching that could cause harm to America, or that we have safety procedures to protect our nuclear reactors, we don't. And we don't have, and even if you don't believe anything, and I tell people, please do not elevate me to the point where anything I say, even if you take it out of context and you say, he said this, don't believe anything I say. Research it yourself. Change your own mind, but do two things. Use the witness of the Spirit with prayer. And number two, use your intellect and the brain God gave you so your skull wouldn't fall in over your eyes. Don't blame it on me and say, oh, the Deagle said, or his expert said. So, Chris, tell us what the hell is going on in Fukushima and what's going on in America, because I get increasingly aggravated by the snooze-tainment out there and people who want to attack and they don't want to actually just evaluate themselves. They want, they take something out of, they'll take something out of context completely and say, he said this.
Well, as far as Fukushima is concerned, I can always, there's plenty of reports of radioactive fish and kelp, but I like to stick to really my area of expertise, which is the physical plant itself and what's going on. We have been talking a lot about spent fuel pool at Fukushima unit number 4, and we've been laying out some pretty technically information, or chock full of information about what is likely to happen, what's possible, what's a good potential to happen to stop the fuel pool cooling or to drain the pool, and what would happen. And it seems that TEPCO, I'm not saying that they're listening to this, but I'm saying that they've stepped up the schedule for trying to remove the fuel from the spent fuel pool at Unit 4. And as we speak, they are removing new fuel that was stored in that spent fuel pool. Remember, that plant was going to have a refueling outage before the disaster struck. That means that there was brand new fuel that gets trucked in. Brand new fuel is not very radioactive. You could touch it with your hands. We prefer you to touch it with gloved hands so that you don't contaminate the fuel. We would and it's stored in a dry location until it's wet, because it's very reactive. This is the stuff that's got a full tank of, let's say it's a full tank of gas.
So it wasn't in the fuel storage pod for number 4?
It was in the new, some of this is in the new fuel storage area. It has been ready to be put, it's been inspected and cleaned and ready to go. And that is the fuel that they are attempting to retrieve right now. And they
so the rods that it's in, the casings are still solid enough they can be picked up and moved, right?
That's the point. That's the big question.
That's the reason why.
Good question.
Well, that's the reason. Exactly. Excellent question. That's the reason why they're trying to pull that out right now, is because they don't know what it would look like. There's debris in that pool, and that's one of the questions that they're trying to answer: is how is the new fuel damaged? New fuel damage is bad for a lot of reasons. It's highly reactive. It is possible to. It's easier to go critical on that than it is to go critical on spent fuels.
But now the old stuff, correct me if I'm wrong, is the rods are probably broken. And
they're probably broken, bent, and
to remove them, they're going to fall apart, right?
Fall apart, or they're twisted so they won't come out in a nice, even, slide the thing out like sliding a rod out of a container. Let's summarize what we've got so far. What you're saying is they've stepped up from 2013 to now to remove these fuel rod assemblies. Maybe what we've said and other experts that have been out there on YouTube and et cetera have been raising information on this, that they know that fuel rod assembly pool, and this is Dr. Gailey's research and his reports as well that you quoted a few weeks ago. They're up on ENE News, and hopefully this report will go up on ENE News as well, because they need to understand if the seal breaks, even if they've removed 1/3 of the fuel, which is new, they can't cool those cooling rod assemblies in order to not go critical and pop their cork. If 10% goes, it'll be 30 to 100 times the radiation released last year, which makes the sky shine so radioactive, none of the service areas from cooling from reactor number 1 that's basically gone critical ever since. Reactor 2, that we know the corium is well into the reactor. Reactor 3, it's having serious events happen with a mixed oxygen fuel plutonium reactor. The whole situation's going south. Welcome back, and you sent me a really interesting summary here too. So we know the Fukushima thing. They're doing what we call stage 1, which I think is kind of like you said, the low hanging fruit to get these 1/3 of the reactor cooling for assemblies. There is a crane there apparently over that open part of the roof, but they also put a cap over the rest of it that structural integrity of the building, we mentioned just before the break that subsidence because of superheated steam created by groundwater and tritiated water superheating it, combined with the shaking from repeated earthquakes. It's 5 times more earthquakes of a level 5 or greater since March 11th last year. Those earthquakes are increasing like a kettle drum, like one of those boom, 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 boom. And the reason is the approach of this dwarf star Nemesis. And as it approaches, it causes gravity waves. Those gravity waves shake the tectonic plates of the Earth. They also trigger off deep nuclear reactions in the sun that cause coronal mass ejections. And we're going to see more great big, we call kill shots that could fly past the Earth like a madman with a mask on, shooting a shotgun while spinning on a rotating platform. And you have to think of that as...
Oh, I'm sorry. To us, it means that we weren't crying wolf or anything about removing the fuel. They really are doing it. They're trying.
Right. Well, that's good. They're trying. What I would say that would be the first thing besides trying to remove it, if they find the assembly rods cannot come out, they need to convert it from thinking this is a nuclear reactor to a toxic waste site, and they need to figure out how can we stop the criticality and stop it from heating at all. And that would be to put in boronated brine and turn it into a giant crystalline kind of superstructure that stays there forever. And literally turn it into a mausoleum of a nuclear reactor. That's what needs to be. It needs to be turned into a Fukushima mausoleum. But it needs to not be under a sarcophagus of concrete.
But is it a stable enough area to do that?
Oh, yeah. You can enshroud it. There's ways of doing that. First off, I've heard crazy ideas like trying to create a small nuke to suck it into the ground. It would just pull more into the groundwater right away and create more immediate catastrophe. What you want to do is you want to put in something that would immediately stop criticality. You want to actually form a crystal structure. Then once it's all formed in a giant crystal structure, then you can, in a sense, in layers, create a sarcophagus. But you have to put spider silk, Kevlar tents over it, filtration systems, a corium catcher underneath it. Nobody even has data or will give us any data on where the corium is, ground penetrating radiator, what's called ion scanning technology, which we have, and what's called torsion field scanning. Literally from space or from an aircraft can actually see those radioisotopes. Most people are aware of it because it's classified, and I had classified clearance, so I know we have it. Every city in the Western world is scanned with a helicopter and with jets from space and from near space up to 50,000 feet and lower altitude. Every city is scanned for radioisotopes in every city in America, in Canada, in the West, in Australia, every week. Every week.
That's also why they know that there are hot spots in certain Israeli embassies and consulates.
That's right. In fact, after 9/11, they discovered that after 9/11, there were 2 places that were hot in New York. It was the Great Kills landfill site from the nuclear debris from 9/11 and the Israeli embassy in Manhattan.
Yeah,
those are the 2 hot spots. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's another report here we need to get into that is about the NRC dealing with San Onofre. And I want you to hop into this one now because this is important, and you have a number of points here. This is hot off the presses. What do they say, Chris?
Okay, so they're coming up with certain root causes of the many, many tube indications. Indication means that the non-destructive examination picked up a flaw in the tube. A lot of these were beyond the 35% of the wall thickness. You're talking about a tube that's 0.043 inches not diameter, 0.043 inches thick. That's pretty thin. So that's a pretty thin piece of metal. And if you have 35% of that's gone, then you have to plug it by law. So they found a lot of those with that. And I'm going through the report, and I can kind of read the way it's going. Only 2 of these tubes were in this area, and the way they're actually. It sounds like they're going to permit restart. I mean, I haven't gone through the whole thing yet, and I can't read their minds. It sounds like that's the way they're going right now, and there's but not right away. And I said,
but Chris, how did they let something like that pass? Because many years ago I was interviewed for a company that did testing for the construction of nuclear facilities, and it was to X-ray. They X-ray everything, every pipe, the walls, everything. How could they? Particularly if you're talking about thin tubes, how the hell could they let that get passed?
It's going to be difficult for me to go ahead and summarize a 95-page report down in a few words, but I'm going to say that due to a lot of the manufacturing processes that were different from the original ones, and it makes a lot of sense to me that instead of really securing these tubes to something solid inside, like it's called the steam generator wrapper. This had a free-floating a tube anti-vibration plate put in, and that these steam generators that actually encouraged the vibration of the tubes instead of stopping or dampening it. So they were actually banging against each other in certain areas.
And of course, by the way, this precipitated an immediate report you did just literally before the show, which means, because we only have about 4 minutes left, what's really going on here, and you got to summarize this. We got a problem that they want to restart the plant because they only had, quote, a few hundred tubes, they said at first were gone when it was well over 1,500. There's a structural engineering defect. This reactor should never be restarted.
Not with those steam generators. And I'm gonna, like I said, I got to keep on reading through this thing. I just got it. It was hot off the press. When I just recognized the buzzwords in some of these particular reports. And, you can't minimize something like this because 1,000 tubes had only 20% of the wall thickness indication. Well, how do you know that when you run it again, it's not going to get to be 40% or 60% or full wall? You don't know that, and I don't see that in the report right now.
Well, let me read the last paragraph here. I've got it right in front of me. At the San Onofre, NRC requires steam generator tubes with more than 35% wear to be plugged. As reported by the company to the NRC last week, Unit 2, 1,595 tubes showed some wear and 510 were plugged. 6 tubes were wear out more than 35%. In Unit 3, 1,806 tubes showed wear of some kind. 807 tubes were plugged. 381 tubes had wear generated greater than 35%. The license chose to plug some tubes with wear less than 35% as a preventive measure. Details of Unit 2 wear can be found here. And at this location, they have links there. Each reactor has 2 steam generators, and each turbine generates 9,627 tubes. Basically, what they're saying is, we screwed up on the design. They did what's called like-for-like engineering, which basically says they put on more tubes than they had. They didn't stabilize it against what's called the plate. So the tubes are literally, as they're generating steam, because they have normal water circulating outside the tubes and hot radioactive water inside the tubes. And the tubes, as they generate steam, cause the tubes to vibrate and then bang against each other and eventually wear, which means radioactive water has been vented in this reactor for years. This reactor has been venting off radioisotopes in the area of Southern California for years. And when it finally blew, what happened is September 8th, they had a station blackout caused in Yuma, Arizona, and that blackout caused what's called a hot shutdown, where the surge in temperature in the tubes caused a lot of them to immediately blow, and then it became evident that there was a problem. The problem, though, was going on for years before that. It didn't just happen because they had a station blackout on September 8th, 2011. It's because there was an engineering flaw, and now they need to make sure that they never restart those 3 steam turbines. And so these 2 latest ones are only put in the last 2 years. I know the senior engineer who's my next door neighbor here for years, and he told me there were all kinds of whistleblower problems and other things, and they eventually fired him. Okay, he was one of the senior engineers at San Onofre. So this is not conjecture. This is first-hand information, and I can tell you, now what we've weeded out here, and if people like Jay Leno think, oh, well, don't worry, your fancy cars won't get radioactive in Los Angeles, you're dangerously close as the wind drifts in your direction. San Onofre has a lot of nuclear material on board, and if these tubes are, quote, just plugged and they're still leaking, we could have a major rupture and a major amount of radiation released there. When September 8th happened, my radiation detector, which was already going up, 2 to 3 times background radiation on and off because of Fukushima, it went up to 4 times background up to around the mid-80s, and it stayed there for 3 to 4 days after the September 8th blackout.
Guys, I grew up around bars. My dad owned them in his business, and that many to be plugged or damaged, that's an insane number.
These are new. Why doesn't the company that we bought these from, Hitachi, these companies, be responsible? Well, these are like I think it was $600 million a piece for each one of these steam turbines that they bought.
Who's got the money to cover that? I mean, really, if you think about it.
Yeah, you know what they want to do? They want to stick us with it, with Southern California Edison, and of course they'll try to spread the cost to San Diego Gas and Electric that buys power from them, where I live, 12 miles away from Ground Zero at San Onofre. Thank God it's shut down, and it'll stay shut down, or else we'll file lawsuits.